Good morning, everybody. Welcome to one more session on Linux. In this particular session, we'll basically understand about system access and about file systems. That means how to access the Linux systems and understand a little bit about file systems. Before we go into that, let us understand a couple of important things that we need to know to work on Linux. Linux has a super account. It is called as a root. Okay. Linux has a super account called as root. With the help of this account root, you can create, modify, delete accounts, or you can do any task that you want to do on Linux. That is a super account. Similarly, like on Windows, you have an administrator, which is a super account. On Linux, a root user is called as a super user. With the help of this user, you can create, modify, or delete any other user. And you can also make changes to system configuration files. Okay. So that means as a root user, you will have all the permissions on the Linux operating system. You can delete, modify, and create users, accounts, or you can make changes to any system configuration files also. And one more thing which is very, very important to understand, Linux is a case sensitive system. What does that mean? You see, this uppercase ABC is not same as lowercase ABC. It is a case sensitive language. And one more thing we need to remember while working with Unix is that whenever you're giving names to any files, any directories, avoid using spaces. Instead, you can give underscore. Okay. Because if you have to log into the folder directory, it will become extremely difficult if there are spaces. Linux does not like spaces. Okay. Don't give spaces. And very important thing we need to understand that Linux kernel is not an operating system. It is basically a software within Linux operating system which takes the commands from the users and pass them to the system hardware or peripherals. That is what a Linux kernel is. These are the couple of things that you need to remember. And last but not the least, Linux is mostly CLI. Okay, that means command line interface, not a GUI. Okay. Now, Linux is very flexible in terms of operations. When you compare with other operating systems, they are multitasking. There are a lot of flexibilities when you're using Linux operating system. These are the couple of things about Linux operating system that you have to remember. Now, how do I can access the Linux server or the Linux system? There are two ways. One is console, second one is remote. What is a console? You will have direct access. You have monitor before you. You can access that. But let's say my Linux server is there somewhere in a data center or somewhere on AWS cloud, Azure cloud, or GCP cloud. How do I access that? I can access that remotely. So to access a Linux system remotely, or in that for that matter any of the Linux distributions remotely, we can use a protocol called as SSH. Okay, this is called as secure shell. Okay, if you guys are aware, if you have to remotely access a Windows server, we use a protocol called as RDP, that is a remote desktop protocol. Similarly, if you have to access a Linux server which is there in a data center or cloud, you access that with a protocol called as SSH, secure shell. Okay, now any tool which has the SSH install, you can work with the tool. Couple of tools that has SSH or like We will do that we will install these tools in some time. One is called as PuTTY MobaXterm. Now with Windows 10, in the command line itself, we have the SSH extension. We can directly log in from that. I will show that. Now if you see here, there are multiple options. One of the option, I mean, if it is Windows, right, this is how you connect. You open a remote desktop connection and then connect. If it is our Linux server, one of the option is you can access through Ubuntu. PuTTY. Now the second option, as I told you, for Windows 10 or newer client version, you can directly go to the command line of your server, and in the command line itself, we can put in the IP address and the password of your Linux server. You will be able to access that. Okay, these are the multiple options. Okay, now other option is PuTTY. Okay, now let us see that hands on. Let's try to connect to a Linux server using PuTTY, MobaXterm, and command line. Okay, now before that, let me show you if you how to connect to a Windows server, right? You have something called as RDP, remote desktop connection. So once you come to the remote desktop connection, you have to put your server IP address here and then select option connect. You'll be able to connect to a Windows server. In case of Linux or any of the Unix based operating systems or Linux based operating systems like Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, CentOS, how can you connect? There are multiple ways. One of the option is called as PuTTY. So I have PuTTY already installed on my laptop. So this is a tool, how a PuTTY tool will look like. Okay. Now here, if you see multiple options, one of the option is asking host name or the IP address of the host. Now through which protocol we have to connect to this host? By using something called as SSH. Okay. Now I have one Unix Linux server that I created on AWS. Let me get that server IP address. Okay. I have created a Ubuntu, sorry, Linux server on Windows. So now you see this is my public IP address. Copy this public IP address and put this on the host name. Okay. Now there are a couple of ways how we can give password. If it is normal server that you have created with username and password, you can just select option open, select option accept. You give your password here, username here. Okay. Now I'm not able to connect here because this is a passwordless uh, authentication that we have created by using a AWS key pair. Now how to connect to this specifically? Now if I go here, let me go to PuTTY again. Let me put the IP address. Now if you see there is something called as SSH here on the left, select the plus button. You see there is authentication. Okay. And under authentication there is credentials. Now you have to give a credentials file here. Select this option browse. My credential file name is secrets. Let me select this. Select option open. Select option open. Okay. Now it is asking for the login. Let me give the username. Now if you see, we are able to log into this particular server. If I give ls, I can see the folders which are there. That is how you can basically log into using PuTTY. Okay. So it's very simple. All that you need to do is that we can go here and use a duplicate window also. We can say a new session, and new session will come up. You need to put your IP address of the server, go to SSH, authentication, give your credentials file, go to private key, browse, give your file name, open and open. Okay, give the username. Because we are providing the authentication using the file, it will take the file to authenticate and log. This is one method. Okay, now let me go to AWS again. Let us see one more method to log into this particular server by using Windows. Okay, a Windows command prompt. Now if I go to this SSH, this is the AWS instance. If you go to connect here, you will get this SSH command to connect with this, with the key name and the username, etc. Just copy this, go to command prompt. Okay, and you have to go to the folder where your that file is there for the authentication. In this case, my file name is called as secret, and it is there in a folder called as downloads. Let me go there. Okay, now let me give that syntax and enter. Now you see, I already logged into this particular server. If you see, the same files are there. This is one more way how we can connect to the Unix service, or sorry, Unix server directly from the Windows command line, but you need to have Windows version 10 or greater than that. Okay, now there is another tool called as MobaXterm. Okay, this is also an SSH tool. There are a lot of functionalities where you can run commands in multiple consoles at the same time. There are a lot of functionalities of this tool. Now this is called as MobaXterm. Now you see there's a session on top. Click on this, and it should be an SSH client. Go to this SSH client and give the IP address. Okay, let me copy the IP address again. This is the IP address of the server. Let me copy this. So even if it is not in AWS server, right, the process will remain the same. Specify the username. In this case, my username is Ubuntu. Go to advanced settings. Give the private key there here. Okay. It is also passwordless authentication using a private key. Okay. I'm giving a key. Press option OK. And then it is importing the key and we are able to log. Okay. So this tool is also very user friendly to run all the commands. So these are the three ways how you can access console. Okay, if you look here, one of the way to access is from Windows command line. Second one is by using PuTTY. Third one, MobaXterm. These are the three ways how we can access the Unix console. Okay, or Unix prompt or connect to a remote server. Now let's say a couple of places you guys will stuck on a console, you'll not be able to go forward and backward. In that case, all you need to do is that you have to press something called as Control C. Okay, if you press Control C, you will be able to go back to the console. Okay, if the control screen is struck, if your command is not running, you can use Control C. Okay, that is little bit about how to access a Linux server. Now let us understand about file systems. Okay, now what is a file system? Every operating system will have a file system. What is the use of this file systems? So very simply we can say that the use of file system is to manage files. Now why it has to manage files? Because there are different types of files. There could be a system configuration file. There could be users files. Let's say if there are 10 users on the server, 10 users has different files. There are log files. There are some commands or scripts that you want to store. Now I don't want to store everything in one place. Let's say for the system configuration files, I want to store in folder A. For user files, I want to store in folder B. For log files, I want to store in folder C. Okay. And other commands, I want to store in different folders. Okay. So I want to store these files in different folders. So for that, we need to have a file system to manage. Now, for example, if it is Windows, now if I go to my Windows server, okay, if you go to C drive, okay, this is the default drive, right? Okay. Now you see program files has one folder. All your program files are there. Now user files are stored in one folder. Okay. And if you see your Windows files are stored in one server. Now it is one folder. So now it is a very easy for the system. If it has to read a system file, it knows that okay, system file, I have to go to program files and read it. Okay, it is very easy for the system to read the files if there's a proper file system, and that is what it is there on Unix. Also there's a proper file system. Now if you have a proper file system, right, you can organize like your closet. If you have shoes, you can organize all the shoes in the shoe rack, jackets in the jackets, pants in the pants, shirts in the shirts, skirts in the skirts. So it is a very well organized. That is what a file system will do. It will organize your data into different files. Okay, there are a lot of file systems. Couple of examples of the file systems. We have something called as uh, ext3, ext4 and sfx. Why? So let's say first version was ext3, that is the name of the file system. Some enhancements is made and it is named as ext4, and some enhancements on top of ext4 is made, and that is called as sfx. So these are the name system files on the Linux servers. Now you see this ntfs and fat, these are the file system names on Windows server. On Windows we have something called as ntfs, FAT, and SMB. These are the names of the file systems. Okay, now that's okay. We are creating files now. How do we navigate the file system? We will learn some commands. One command is called as pwd, second is called as cd, third one is called as ls. These are the three commands that we will learn. What is cd? Cd stands for change directory. It is a primary command for moving around the file system, in and out of the file system. If you want to move, that means you have to use a command called as cd. Cd stands for change directory. What do I mean by move in and out? That means going into a directory, coming out of a directory. Now if you want to know in which directory you are there, then you have to use a syntax called as pwd. Okay, pwd is the syntax that is used to see where are you currently. Okay, now ls stands for list of directories, and files is called as ls. Okay, let me go to my console and let us see those things. Now we are logged in multiple places. Let me use MobaStream. Let me log into that again. Open. I'm logging into the Ubuntu system here. Okay, clear. Now the first one is pwd. It shows what is my current directory. So I'm inside a directory called as slash home slash Ubuntu. Okay. Now what is slash? Now on Windows, we have something called as C drive as a root directory. That means the first directory that is created is called as C drive. All your program files are created under C drive. But on Linux, the root directory is called as slash. Okay. This is the root directory. That whatever is C drive on Windows is represented as slash on Linux. Okay. Now, if I want to go to slash, all that I need to do is that I need to do a cd, that means change directory. Where you have to go? Slash. Enter. Now, if you see here, I am there in slash. This is the root directory for Unix, Linux. Okay, let me see where I am now there now. PWD. Now it is showing me a root directory. I am there in a root directory. Previously, when I gave PWD, it is there in a folder called as slash home slash Ubuntu. Now I am there in a folder called as a root directory. Now if I give ls here, I can see there are lot of folders. Okay, there are lot of folders here. Now let us say I want to go to the folder called as home. How can I go? Cd, that is change directory, home. Now I'm inside the directory called as slash, that means under root. There's a folder called as home. I'm inside that. How to check that? PWD. Now it is showing me I'm inside a folder called as slash root directory, and in the root directory there's a directory called as home. I want to see what are the files or directories which are there under this folder called as home. Let's do a ls. Inside this ls there's a directory called as Ubuntu. Let me go into that. ls. Inside this there are these files and folders called as docker, compose, outing, etc. Let me do a pwd now. Now you see what is the directory that I'm there in. I'm there in this directory called as slash home slash Ubuntu. Okay. Now if I have to come back, I'm there in slash home slash Ubuntu, right? I want to come back to home directory. I can use cd start space dot dot. Enter. Now let's do pwd. Now I'm there in a folder called as slash home. Now let's say I want to come back to the root directory, cd space dot dot, enter, and let's do a pwd. Now inside a root directory. Okay, that is how we can use pwd to understand what is your current location, in which folder that you are there in, or you can say what path you're working on. cd is to change directory. Okay. Now let us understand about different file types that are available in Linux. Now for that, let me go to into a other folder. Let's say cd home, cd Ubuntu, where I have couple of files here. If I do ls here, I can see lot of files, right? I can use another command called as ls hyphen space hyphen l. L stands for long list, long list of each and every file here. Okay. Now there are only directories. Let me run this again. Okay. Let me also make one file. We'll discuss about syntax touch later. Now let me give ls hyphen l. Okay. Now if we see, these are the folders and files. Now if you look here, any a file which is starting with D, that means it is a directory. Any file, sorry, any file which is starting with D, that means that file is nothing but a directory. If it is starting with a hyphen here, that means it is a regular file. Okay. If it is starting with a hyphen, that means it is a regular file. If it is starting with D, that means it is a folder. There are other types of files also. Let me go to my presentation. There are other types of files also. If it is starting with hyphen, it is nothing but a regular file. If it is starting with D, it is nothing but a directory. If it is starting with L, it means there is some kind of link. Okay, there are two types of links. One is soft link, hard link. We'll discuss that. Now, if there is C, that means it is basically a special file or a device file. If it is starting with S, that means it is a socket. If it is starting with P, that means it is a named pipe. If it is starting with B, that means it is a block device. Okay, these are the different file types that we have. Majorly, we will use this regular files and directories. If you see any file starting with hyphen, it is a regular file. Any file symbol starting with D, that means it is a directory. Now, let us discuss about something called as root. Okay, now you will hear a lot of times a root folder, a root user, a root directory. There are a lot of things that you use. These are the three things that will be a root can be referred as. Now let us understand what are these three things. What is a root account? Now, as I told you, on Linux, a root means what? It is a super user. On Linux, root means a super user. That is basically referred as a root account. Okay. A root account is a super user. He can run all the powerful commands on Linux. Now, whatever directories, whatever files you want to store at a root folder is determined as a slash. Okay, root account, a root folder. Like C drive is the root folder in Windows, right? Similarly, slash is the root folder on Linux. Like administrator is the super user on Windows. Similarly, a root is the super user on Linux. And the root is specified as small letters ROOT. Now there is a root directory. So as a root user, whatever files that you store, that is stored under a root home directory. Okay, that root home directory is located here. So every user on Linux has a root directory. Okay, that root directory, if let's say for example I'm one user, my name is Satish, then if I'm storing any files, it will be under a path called as slash Satish. So every user will have one folder to store his files. That is about root. Now let us discuss about something called as file system paths. There are two file system paths. One is called as absolute path. Second is called as a relative path. Okay. So now let me go back to my console and show you guys the difference. Let me log into this again. Go to session, SSH. Let me put the username, private key. Okay, I logged into my console now. Okay, now let us say there are two paths, right? One path is absolute path, one path is relative path. Okay, now let us say in which path I am in PWD. I am in this particular path. Let's say I want to come back. Now let's say PWD, I'm in home path. Now I want to go to this path directly, slash home slash Ubuntu. Then what I can do to change the path, it is CD. Okay, or else let's go to a path called as now let's say, let me show you. Okay, CD slash, there's a folder called as var, and inside the folder there's a folder called as log. Okay, I want to go here. I can directly enter CD slash var slash log ls. Now these files and folders are there. Okay. Now there is other way how I can enter. One is cd slash var. Okay. Another one cd. Now I have to go into log, right? Log. Okay. So one, we are directly giving the complete path. One, we are entering stage by stage. Okay. That is what is called as absolute path and relative path. Absolute path means it will start with slash, that indicates the path starts at the root directory. Okay, a relative path does not begin with the root directory. It identifies a location where that currently it is there in and logs into the folder. That is what a relative path and absolute path is. Now let's look into the summary of what we have discussed till now. First, we understood how to access Linux server. We can access through PuTTY or command prompt on Windows or MobaXterm. Any SSH client, we can access Linux server. Second thing, we understood about the file system of Linux, how the files are organized. Okay, the file system that is used in a Linux is ext3, ext4 or xfs. Now we understood the importance of the syntax called as PWD, and then we looked into cd command, and then we understood different types of files like files, directories, etc. And we also understood about a root. What is root? Root folder, root account, okay, root directory. And then we understood about the path, something called as absolute path and relative path. These are the different things that we have learned in this particular chapter. I'll see you guys in the next module. Take care.